Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 639, and today's date is April 11th, 2015, and the title of this episode is U.S. Economic Recovery Illusion is Falling Apart. Let's get right into the economic collapse news. Now, we understand that Greece has made a payment to the IMF, and we understand there's more payments that are coming up. Next one is in April, which is April 24th. And right now, the creditors have given Athens 6 or 7 days to present a comprehensive list of measures and reforms in order to prepare for the April 24th Eurogroup, which will decide if the 7.2 billion euros of financial aid will be dispersed. So, again, we understand that Greece made a payment. We understand that Greece now is strapped for cash. We realize that Greece has been working with Russia. They've signed a deal. We know a pipeline's coming in. And we're going to have to see where this actually goes from this point, because as we can see, it does look like Greece is trying to pivot away from the Eurozone. And this is not the only country in Europe that is looking at the Eurozone and saying, you know something, this might not be for us. We see in Italy's 5-Star Movement Party has collected more than 100,000 signatures on a petition calling for a law that would allow a referendum on withdrawal from the Eurozone. Basically, coming from Sibilla, he's saying, who wants to stay in Euro? This is the main question, but we don't want to get out just like this. We want a program and a discussion and then let the citizens decide. It's really necessary today as the situation in Italy is going from bad to worse, where jobs and economy are concerned. We can't have our own fiscal policy, but without the euro, it is possible in Italy to do so. And he's saying, of course, what every other nation is saying, that their economy is collapsing under the euro, under the central banking system. They can't survive. And we see protests throughout Europe right now. We see it in Spain. We saw it in Portugal. In France right now, as many as 120,000 protesters took to the streets of Paris with these people saying, you know something, we don't want austerity anymore. The Eiffel Tower was shut down for the first time since 2010 due to the strike. The people called for improvement of social protection and work conditions, as well as a development of public services. The demonstrators showed their opposition to austerity measures introduced by the government, which is imposed on them by the central banking system. The entire European scene right now is falling apart. They're in a collapse situation, held together by tape and glue. They're just creating money, just like the United States did, just like Japan did, and it is getting them nowhere. All this money that is being created is going to the banking system, to the elite, not to the everyday person. The everyday person has to suffer while those people basically pillage the countries. And we could see here in the United States, the illusion of an economic recovery is just that, an illusion. I mean, look at retail and look at the future of the country's malls. I mean, I know we talk about store closings and everyone, oh yeah, 200 stores here, but think about the impact on the malls across the nation. When Sears, JCPenney, Macy's, and a lot of the small retail stores, they start to close. Because you have to remember, we've had Sears closing many, many stores. Radio Shack, which was a staple in almost every single mall, closing down. Wet Seal closing down 338 stores. We see JCPenney closing down stores. Macy's was closing down 14 of them, of their stores. Abercrombie & Fitch closing 60 stores in 2015. Delilah's closing 95 stores. All these store closures in these malls, especially the anchor stores, it means these malls are doomed. That means a lot of these malls, and we're seeing a lot of dead malls across the country, And basically, it's open real estate. And the people who own these malls, there's no income coming in. And we can see this is spreading throughout the United States, where we're seeing more and more of these stores go out, more of these strip malls closing down. It's just vacant retail stores that are out there right now. And they're trying to push on us that everything is fine. They keep coming out with all these fantastic analytical articles trying to convince us that the economy is improving. And one of the places they're trying to convince us is that the housing market is doing much, much better. I mean, the idea that the housing market is recovering from the housing bubble that burst in 2005, 2006 has been promoted by Wall Street, the National Association of Realtors, the National Association of Home Builders, and the corporate media. They're continually using propaganda to convince everyone that we're in this housing recovery. Bloomberg News, about a week ago, came out with an article called "The New Indicator Shows There's No Bubble Forming." Well, we heard this before from the central bank, where they told us that real estate was contained. No, there's no bubble. We're not even forecasting a recession. And this is how you know. If they have to convince you so hard that there's no bubble, we're in a recovery, you know we're not. Because if we are truly in a recovery, they do not have to prove and continually tell you you're in a recovery. You know why? Because you feel it, you know it, you see it. It's not something they have to prove to you. And basically, Bloomberg's news report was little more than a marketing propaganda for the housing market. It was clear that Bloomberg did not research the validity of Nationwide's new housing market indicator. And this is coming from investmentresearchdynamics.com. They took a look at the housing market. They ripped it apart. And what did they see? Guess what? We're not in a recovery. Although Nationwide offers no detail regarding the sources for the data it uses, the variables in its index are employment, demographics, the mortgage market, and house prices. Basically, the information about the index provided by Nationwide is a housing index has to be one of the most preposterous economic indicators outside of the employment and GDP reports. The fact that Nationwide does not disclose any details about its index other than the parameter labels makes the quality level of the metric highly suspect. Nationwide also owns a bank which offers mortgages, home equity loans, and home equity lines of credit. This market health report is a marketing tool for its mortgage business. The housing bubble burst in 2005-2006. That bubble was never allowed to fully deflate. What occurred since the Fed began pumping in $3.6 trillion of printed money into the banking system is a dead cat bounce in the housing market. This is all due to the series of a dead cat bounce in sales volume, which occurred primarily from Fed and government intervention policies. For instance, the spike in 2009 to 2010 was triggered when the government implemented a first-time homebuyer tax credit effective between 2008 and 2010. The bounce that occurred after 2010 was primarily fueled by big investment funds buying hundreds of thousands of foreclosed and distressed homes. The government offered 0% financing to any big fund. Right now, home ownership rate in the United States basically has plunged. We are back to 1994 levels. So when we look at all this, in reality, the housing market is deteriorating. It's not getting better. Home prices right now have driven higher since 2010, but by a combination of the Fed artificially driving interest rates to a record low levels and the direct injection of $1.7 trillion into the housing market via the Fed's mortgage QE policy in its attempt to stimulate the housing market. Well, guess what they stimulated? Housing prices. They didn't stimulate people going out and purchasing homes. Home builders have built up a record level of inventory on their balance sheets. Moreover, the artificially induced rise in home prices is a massive wealth transfer mechanism from home buyers to home sellers. 90% of all home buyers and 93% of all new construction home buyers use a mortgage. The question is, if the real estate industry is improving, people would go out and use mortgages to buy them, correct? Yes, that is correct, because I can't believe that everyone has $400,000, $500,000, $600,000 in cash just laying around, and they're just going to go ahead and use it to purchase a house. So basically, the Mortgage Bankers Association reports mortgage applications on a weekly basis, and according to their most recent weekly report, mortgage purchase applications are 31% lower than in 2001. In the context of nearly 14 years of population growth and near record low mortgage rates, this metric represents a housing market which sales volume has significantly deteriorated in comparison to the market in 2001. So basically, the housing market is not in a recovery. People are not taking out the mortgages. People are not going out and purchasing the homes. All the government did, the central bankers, all they did was inflate prices by telling the banks, listen, keep those houses off the market. Hedge funds, investment companies, pump up the market, purchase those homes, don't sell them. But the rest of America is sitting on the sidelines. They don't have the funds to go in and purchase these homes. And this is why back in August of 2013, going forward, they laid off tens of thousands of people in mortgage departments in Bank of America, Citibank, JP Morgan Chase. And it is continuing today because they know the real estate industry is dead. This is why they're starting these programs up to bring in more people. This is why Freddie and Fannie are creating that program that you only need 3% down. Banks are saying 0% down. We'll take subprime people. Gallup's Economic Confidence Index returns to negative territory at this point. The economy right now is completely falling apart. The illusion is falling apart. And what's very interesting is that the White House came out with a warning. The White House warned this week that states would have to cut spending or raise revenue by a combined $21 billion in the event of a recession. Now that is a very strange warning to put out there today. If they're trying to tell us we're in a recovery, why would they be concerned about the states raising revenue or cutting spending? Because as we know, the unemployment numbers are really not 5.5%. They're closer to 30%. Most of the states are not bringing in the revenue. We are a part-time nation. If people are going from full-time to part-time or full-time to no job, no revenue is coming in. The White House warns need to be much more prepared for a very volatile fiscal conditions than they had been in the past. That's a very interesting statement. Why would they be telling the states this? And if you look around, most of the states, their revenue coming in is in the negative territory. Those states that have positive are in New York, Wall Street, North Dakota, the fracking industry, oil, Texas, fracking, California, movie making. Most of the other states are in deep negative territory for revenue. Florida, negative 17%. South Carolina, negative 9%. Georgia, negative 12%. Virginia, negative 10%. Pennsylvania, negative 2%. Ohio, negative 10%. Louisiana, negative 13%. Utah, negative 6%. Arizona, negative 10%. New Mexico, negative 1.3%. We can see right now they're worried. Actually, Alaska, negative 75.1%. They're very worried about what is coming, and they understand the collapse is coming. And we understand that the United States government central bankers, they are continually pushing to take the weapons away from the people. A report came out that 22 million Americans have anger issues. Well, I hate to say this, but we're all human. Everyone has anger issues. Everyone gets upset. Everyone, every once in a while, comes out and is a little angry. You're human. This is natural. And they're saying that most of these people who have these anger issues break or smash things and get into fights. And they also might own a firearm. Well, if they're so worried about this, wouldn't all these people be in their cars, maybe getting angry and hitting someone? Or just picking fights on the street? But we don't see this. This is more propaganda to take the weapons away from the people. That's it, period. Everything else they tried did not work. They have thousands upon thousands of laws infringing on the Second Amendment because they know the Second Amendment, the rights of the people, is the law of the land. They can't do anything with it. They can't take it away. So all they do is write laws to try to infringe on it. And of course, right in the Second Amendment, it says you cannot infringe upon it. So everything they're doing is a violation. We see ever since they've been trying to get the firearms away from the people, the firearm industry has seen an unprecedented surge in gun production and gun sales. Every time they do something, the people know what they're trying to do. And you have to remember, a population that has weapons, they are eventually in control of what the government does. The people without weapons are controlled by those governments. And this is what they're nervous about. This is what they're afraid of. We see the government is continually spying on American people. We see in Baltimore, Baltimore police have been using the device called Stingray to track cell phones. And they've been doing this since 2007. And basically, the federal authorities from the FBI, they wanted this to be kept a secret. And judges are getting very angry with this right now. The judge there threatened to hold these people in contempt if he didn't provide information about the Stingray devices. And of course, those police forces that use this device, they have a non-disclosure agreement. And they really can't say that they're using these devices. They rather not give any evidence whatsoever about this device. And this tells us something. This tells us that all throughout the country and all these cities, they are spying on all the American people without warrants, violating the Fourth Amendment. And we can see right now, the reason they're doing this is because they need to know what everyone is doing. We see out in Spain, and I mentioned this before about the gag law, where basically this gag law restricts citizens' liberties and criminalizes their rights to protest. They have to pay a fine if they go out of the framework of the gag law. Basically, it's a €600 fine for showing a lack of respect to anyone in uniform, while the photographing or filming of police officers, they could put them in danger, and if you do that, you will receive about a €30,000 euro fine. Well, they decided to have a protest using holograms, and it was a hologram march. And I have the video on the X22Report.com site. Those people on YouTube, you can see the video there. And basically, this is just holograms of people protesting. But again, in this point, the government is actually winning because the people, the impact of real people out there protesting is much different than a video or hologram being projected and showing what they're doing, because you really can't do anything in this situation. Yeah, it looks cool, but the people standing in front of the Capitol, but the live, physical people saying we're not going to do this with millions and millions of people standing there is a different impact than just holograms walking back and forth. And we can see all these governments right now are cracking down on the people, trying to remove their rights, trying to control them. We see the war is starting to build up all across the world right now, because we know the central bankers are trying to provoke a war to cover up this collapse. UK, Argentina, they've summoned each of the other's ambassador back because of the Falkland dispute. And we've seen this once before. And again, we understand that they're trying to provoke and trying to ramp this baby up. They want war because they know the collapse is coming. It is falling apart right in front of us. Germany, the businesses in Germany are angry with the Eurozone, with their German government, saying, listen, these sanctions that we placed on Russia, they are hurting us. German business representatives continue to criticize EU sanctions against Russia. For months, the industry has felt the consequences of the sanctions, and they cannot understand why they are the ones left footing the bill. The losses that the German companies have suffered as a result of the sanctions run into the billions. And it's not just Germany. I mean, we see Greece, we see Italy, we see France, we see Poland. All these nations, with all the food that they have left over, that they no place to send, to make a sale, they're just rotting. They're losing billions and billions of dollars. But we know the central bankers are continually pushing war. They're not going to stop. They might change tactics, but their goals are always the same. Ukraine started shelling the positions of the militia of the Donetsk People's Republic. They brought in the tanks and they started shelling, and this is ongoing. And of course, the DPR spokesman said these are provocative actions on the part of the Ukrainian armed forces, and they're doing this in many different towns surrounding Donetsk and Lugansk. They're continually shelling, bringing in tanks. It looks like they're pushing the war once again. We understand that Poroshenko signed a martial law bill, introduced it. They want to send all Russian people into basically intern camps, put them into prison. We see right now the Security Bureau of Ukraine seized 2 Odessa bloggers who are trying to launch an investigation of what really happened there with the burning of people. And now we see, as of April 9th, the SBU has blocked more than 10,000 websites. It says that law enforcers seized the servers, and that one SBU official told the newspaper, "We have made the decision of the court and confiscated equipment. He promised to return the servers back to the people in 2 months." But what they're doing is they're blocking all of this. They don't want this information out there. They don't want the truth out there. They only want their propaganda side. And this is why a government would have to block websites. Because if they're telling the truth and everything's free and open, they wouldn't need to do this. We see that there are documents that reveal covert US-UK NATO propaganda war in Ukraine. NATO documents show that a coordination meeting on STRATCOM training for Ukraine is now in process. STRATCOM stands for Strategic Communication, which means dealing with the inability of Ukraine media to provide sufficient reach for the southeast of the country, sufficient propaganda to that area. Basically, they're fighting a propaganda war. They're taking down the websites that are trying to get the truth out there. They want to fill it up with their propaganda only. And this is not freedom. This is not democracy. This is dictatorship. This is do what we say or else. And remember, those controlling the Ukrainian government, they are the United States government, the central bankers. Think about it. Think about what if they decided to suspend the Constitution. It would be the same thing here. No difference. We see NATO right now is conducting their first test of Russia Rapid Response Force. NATO is now set to test a new, very high readiness joint task force, which will see soldiers from the Czech army ready for deployment within 2 days. NATO is completing a first testing of its new force created to face new challenges from Russia. Some 150 soldiers from Czech Army's 43rd Airborne Battalion have been training to be ready for a deployment within 48 hours. In the Netherlands, 900 German and 200 Dutch soldiers have been doing the same. The units will be moved for further trials to Poland in June, while some 25,000 NATO troops will complete the exercise of the new force in Italy, Portugal, Spain, in October and November. They're expecting something to happen. Russia is not doing anything. They're not provoking. But what we see is we see the United States, central bankers, NATO, Europe, continually provoking nonstop. We see that the missile shield is not being taken down, even though there's a framework deal put together with Iran, because remember, the missile shield was for Iran. And we can see that right now NATO, the US, they're coming up with all different reasons on why this missile shield needs to stay. Because we knew from the beginning this missile shield was not for Iran. They don't even have a nuclear weapon. It was for Russia all along. We see the United States is out there and they're trying to convince us that Russia is trying to provoke the United States. But actually the opposite is happening. We see that an unidentified airborne target was spotted over the Baltic Sea by Russian air defense on April 7th, flying directly towards the Russian border. A Su-27 fighter jet was scrambled to inspect the target. Moving up to the identified aircraft, the Russian pilot flew around it several times, made sure it was a US RC-135U reconnaissance plane, and reported its tail number to the ground control. And basically, this plane, they're saying, was moving towards the Russian border with its transponder switched off. Didn't the United States, or I think it maybe was the British, didn't they say Russia was flying their plane without the transponder and that's illegal? Well, we've seen this done many, many times before. And this is something they use to provoke and push Russia. And of course the United States is out there saying, oh my God, the Su-27 almost flew way too close to the plane, almost collided, and this could have been an act of war. I mean, they're trying everything they possibly can to push this forward. We see out in the Middle East, the U.S. State Department has approved sale of about 356 Hellfire 2 missiles to Egypt now to battle Yemen. I mean, they already lifted the embargo to supply Egypt with F-16 aircraft, Harpoon missiles, M1A1 tanks, and now they're selling them Hellfire missiles. The approval for the Hellfire missiles also comes as Egypt began its first airstrikes against the Houthi targets in Yemen. And we can see right now that they're pushing their agenda in Yemen, and it will spread. We can see that is the first country where the people really kicked out the complete government. They were no longer in control. And the United States government central bankers want their puppet government back into this country. And they will do whatever they have to get them back in there. Doesn't matter if they'll kill every single person in the country. They'll do whatever they need to do. The next country is going to be Libya. Then it's going to spread to Lebanon. We're already doing it in Iraq. The Middle East is falling apart. They're losing control. They do not have control of the puppet regime in these countries anymore. We see they're continually using the theme that Iran is bringing in weapons to the Houthis. Well, how can they? There's a naval blockade. Their troops, the Saudi troops, are surrounding Yemen. How are these weapons getting in there? Think about this for a second. And you have to remember the goal is always the same with Syria, with Iran. Even if there's a framework deal, their goal is to get access to their natural resources and to get control of the central bank. Because what do they really gain with this nuclear deal? What? Iran is limiting their nuclear program? They're still using their nuclear program. There's never been a nuclear weapon in Iran. They signed the NPT. They have IAEA inspections. There's nothing there. But there is a 1987 document that shows that Israel has nuclear weapons, and they've never signed the NPT or had any type of IAEA inspections. So very interesting. And if the United States is very concerned under the NPT, they have the ability to go in there and help Iran and monitor what's going on. Just like the open sky treaty where the United States flies over Russia to show that there's no troops there. If there were troops there, they would have shown satellite images. If there was truly a nuclear weapon in there, guess what? All these inspections, everything they're doing, they would have said, oh yeah, here it is. But they can't find anything. And they're continually using this propaganda because the goal is always the same. And they have to set everything up just in case one tactic fails. We've seen this time and time again. Pakistan was asked to join the war in Yemen, but Pakistan Parliament today passed a resolution demanding that the government not join the Saudi Arabian war against Yemen. We see the naval blockade with Yemen right now is basically hitting the people in Yemen. Over 90% of the food consumed in the country, including virtually all of its wheat and rice, is imported from abroad, generally by ships, and a lot of ships are being turned away, or a lot of them are a little nervous about coming into port. So right now the people are suffering. They don't have the food. And we can see food prices are already rising dramatically. A lot of shops are running short on supplies at any price. Locals are desperately trying to stockpile, fearing a long war and the lack of either commercial or humanitarian shipments from the outside world. We see some of the Red Cross has got in there, but some of it's being blocked. They're making the people in Yemen suffer for kicking out the puppet regime. That's basically it. And what's very interesting, 8 countries, Russia, China, India, and others, have come in, flown their citizens out of Yemen to protect them. I mean, Russia has made 5 or 6 trips already. China came in. They were the unidentified soldiers, got their people out. U.S., they told their people, you're on your own. We're not going in there. I mean, why is that? I mean, the U.S. government and press continually says that the U.S. is so incredibly good and altruistic. So how could this be happening? There is nothing confusing about the U.S. government abandoning its own citizens in a war zone, but rescuing and assisting Saudi bombers in the same war zone. I mean, look what's happening here. They don't care about the people. Right now, there's a lawsuit going on. The lawsuit challenges the constitutionality of the U.S. government's failure to protect Americans in Yemen from ongoing military action. The American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee, the Council of American Islamic Relations, Asian Americans Advancing Justice, Asian Law Caucus, today announced the filing of a lawsuit against Secretary of State John Kerry and Secretary of Defense Ashton Carter, seeking government action to evacuate American citizens trapped in Yemen. So there's a war going on. Saudi Arabia is bombing. Of course, this is the puppet force of the United States government. They could be hitting Americans. They don't even know. And they're not evacuating whatsoever. And the United States has the Iwo Jima, which they told us was put into place, which is an amphibious ship, to evacuate the people if needed. So far, nothing. There's 2 aircraft carriers out there. So far, nothing. So what are they there for? They're there to make war. Right now, the militants in Libya have threatened to attack the country's main oil-producing regions if exports of the key resource are resumed. Basically, the puppet government right now is attempting to stop oil revenues from falling into the hands of the rival parliament. And we can see right now the people have control of Tripoli. They're the government. They want to sell the oil not using the dollar. The puppet government, of course, backed by the U.S. central bankers, they're saying, no, you cannot sell this oil. And we can see very shortly this war is going to be spreading from Yemen into Libya. We're getting to that point. We see the BBC was hacked by ISIS. The BBC was feared to have fallen victim to an ISIS cyber attack. Hackers appeared to post Islamic State propaganda during a live broadcast. Again, they're trying to show everyone that the Islamic State has the ability to cyber attack, to keep everyone in fear, to keep everyone on the lookout for this next false flag event. They're building up to it, and you can see it's happening over and over and over again. And you have to remember, the Islamic State is a proxy army for the U.S. government, central bankers, UK, Israel, and they're pushing this as hard as they can because they're really not getting any traction from everything that the Islamic State is doing. I mean, they're trying everything. They're destroying artifacts. They're hitting museums. They're decapitating people. They're doing whatever they possibly can to strike fear into the people, where the people say, yes, we have to go into this country and we have to get them. It's not working. Most of the people looking at this going, a lot of this is fake. A lot of this isn't real. Actually, how do we even know it's the Islamic State? Who are these people? Are they paid mercenaries? And we know that they are. We see the United States government is continually pushing that the Islamic State is in the United States and they're recruiting people by the thousands. And we see it once again. The FBI has set up another 2 people. And they do this over and over and over again. A Kansas man arrested and charged Friday morning for attempting to provide material support to the Islamic State was under surveillance by the FBI last year when he checked himself into a mental institution. The FBI always goes after these people that are a little bit mentally not that stable, and they convince them. And we can see right now that according to a document obtained by The Intercept, the U.S. Army had approved the new recruit for a secret clearance. John T. Booker Jr., who also goes by the name of Mohammed Abdullah Hassan, was arrested Friday and charged with attempting to provide material support to the Islamic State, plotting to use a weapon of mass destruction, and planning to destroy property with an explosive. Yet, in March 2014, Booker was already being watched by the FBI, who determined he had no ability to carry out such an attack. Booker had in February 2014 signed up to join the U.S. Army and had even been approved for security clearance by the FBI. Booker's plan to join the Army were derailed the next month by his mental health problems. So what changed? Well, the FBI sought this guy out, and basically 2 FBI informants introduced themselves to him. It is unclear when Booker was released from the mental health institution, but basically what happened was, on October of 2014, he met his first 2 FBI informants. He didn't know this. By the spring of 2015, Booker had been introduced to another informant. And according to the indictment unsealed Friday, the 2 informants provided the 20-year-old with materials, support that led to his arrest on Friday. And guess what? All the information and everything they're doing was coming from the informants. Left by himself, he could not do anything. Actually, he's mentally disturbed. And the FBI uses this over and over to show that the Islamic State is all over the place. And so far, every single case is exactly the same. They find these people. They provide them with everything. They have no real evidence. They never committed any type of act. They never find any explosives. They never find anything. It is propaganda. That is it. Listen, everyone. Thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.